Today we have a completely different, I don't even want to call it a webinar, a conversation, if you will, very different from the usual ones we do about AI, tech, PMSs, and all that. We're going to talk about brand and standardization in vacation rentals, a subject that is very true to my heart, being in the context of guest experience in hospitality and vacation rentals for a while. My name is Francois. I'm one of the co-founders of Enso Connect, and we've got Ashley and Rachel. I'll do a quick intro on Enso before I go into the agenda. Enso was founded quite a few years ago now. We operate with over 60,000 listings globally. We focus on digitizing and monetizing the guest experience. So be it AI messaging, guest portals, workflows, effectively creating that full digital experience that matches your brand and trying to standardize the experience in our own way with technology. But that's not the whole picture, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Ashley, do you want to talk a bit about Inhaven?
Sure. I'm Ashley Chang, founder and CEO of Inhaven. I've spent most of my career in sourcing and branding. I led global merchandising operations for Tiffany & Company, where I was responsible for the brand presentation standards around the world. So that came to our stores in Beijing had a very similar experience in Orlando, Florida. I then went on to run merchandising for the company store, which is a Home Depot private label brand. And so I've spent most of my career in sourcing. I have 4 little kids, and when we travel, we should stay in vacation rentals. We no longer stay in hotels. We need multiple bedrooms, etc. And just the experience of going to vacation rentals and booking on places, Airbnb and Vrbo, and showing up to not such a great experience a lot more times than not. Given my sourcing background, knowing where to get the best home supplies, I founded Inhaven. Inhaven is a B2B marketplace for vacation rental professionals, and we help vacation rental professionals source products within bed, bath, kitchen, and cleaning and consumables. And we have a great inventory management tool as well, where you can have your team scan QR codes to grab products out of your warehouse or your office. So lots of different inventory management tools that we offer. We were just founded in late 2022, and we were awarded the VRMA Supplier of the Year award 2 years ago. So we've had a lot of impact in a small amount of time.
I love it. Awesome. And perfect timing, Rachel. I know you dropped out there for a second, so you're good. So a bit about Rachel and Abode Luxury Rentals. You want to share a bit more about what Abode is all about and yourself?
Yep, I'm Rachel Alday. Can you hear me okay?
100%.
Okay, good. I was worried. All right, so I'm Rachel Alday. I own Abode Luxury Rentals with my husband, Rob. We've been in business for 18 years. We started in Park City in the very beginning, and we now manage over 140 properties in Park City, Utah. And we expanded into Jackson Hole, Wyoming about 13 years ago. So right now we manage 40-something properties in Jackson Hole. And then about 3 years ago, we expanded into Sun Valley, Idaho. And there's about 20-something that we manage there. So we manage around 200 properties total, and we are really specific with what we have in our portfolio. So it's luxury properties that we manage, an average of $1,000 a night at the base on up to 10 or 20,000 a night even. So that's a unique position to be in. But I have become very obsessed with the concept of standards in the industry. And really it's happened after I met Ashley and started working with Inhaven. Abode, we work with Inhaven in terms of the sourcing and stuff that they do. And it's been a really interesting journey because I have gotten super down the rabbit hole on standards. And so I can't wait to talk about it today.
Awesome. And so for context, how did this conversation happen? Rachel and I were at a dinner hosted by Extend Team, and we were talking about standardization and so on. And the topic of Westin beds, Westin hotels, and so on came up. We're going to talk a bit about that. I don't want to steal the thunder here, but standardization in the hotels, the history of how it all happened. And it shows you how cyclical some of these things can be. And when is the time for vacation rentals? What is going to happen with vacation rental standardization? And so I'll start off with the first question for Ashley, which is, what can vacation rentals learn from other hospitality industries or other hospitality brands looking at hotels? And Ashley, feel free to kind of slide through any of the decks if it's helpful for what you want to share here. So I'll start with you, Ashley.
Yeah, I think we need a little history lesson first, because the standards and brands that hotels have today have not always been there. I'm just going to slide through. Am I doing this right, Francois?
We'll take whichever format works. Okay, it doesn't matter.
So why are brands important? Brands are important because they give meaning to customers, right? So I'm a hotel customer. When I'm on the road in the middle of Pennsylvania with my daughter for a soccer tournament, I am fine staying in a Holiday Inn Express, right? I know I'm going to have a safe place to stay, comfortable bed and breakfast the next morning. I am not going to stay at Bob's Motel across the street. I could be murdered there, but I trust the Holiday Inn Express, right? When I travel for work, I choose Marriott because Marriott has strong Wi-Fi, F&B in the building. So that makes it really easy. And when I'm traveling with my family for Christmas and we're not staying in vacation rentals, because we typically do, we'll choose a Walt Disney World resort. Why? Because we need transportation for our kids, kid-friendly restaurants. And so each of these brands have meaning, and I'm not sticking to one tier, only go luxury, but I know what I'm paying for and I know what I'm getting when I book these brands. And every other hospitality industry, whether it's hotels, whether it's restaurants, whether it's airlines, are built on a quality framework. And so in the hotels, just as we went through, they have something called the chain scale, where you have everything from economy all the way up to luxury. In the restaurants, you have a chain scale where you have fast food, quick serve, McDonald's, you have casual dining like Cheesecake Factory, all the way up to fine dining with 11 Madison Park, which is the famous restaurant that Will Gadara wrote about in his
Reasonable hospitality.
Yeah, and then your airline industry, right? You don't expect the same kind of service and experience on a Delta, full service Delta, that you do on an ultra low cost Spirit. But you might choose to fly Spirit if you've got a bachelor party one weekend, and maybe you choose Delta when you're traveling with your elderly parents. So you make choices and you travel up and down these quality frameworks. But unfortunately, in the vacation rental industry, that doesn't exist. And we'll go back into the service levels. The hotel industry, as Francois was just saying, has not always been this way. So if you go back to the 70s and 80s, there were a couple of things that happened that made hotels super interesting to the American consumer in particular. One is there was an introduction in there was changes in technology in the way that cars were manufactured. And suddenly the average American could afford a car, these economy level cars like a Ford Taurus, a Toyota Camry. At the same time, the US government was investing in the highway interstate system. So people can now afford cars and they could afford to travel. And so you saw all these motels, hotels pop up along the interstate system. And guests complained because they were, okay, great, we have a place to stay, but what are we walking into? And there were a lot of quality challenges there. And then something big, so when you would show up in these hotels, you might remember, if you're my age, you would show up to colorful coverlets, lumpy mattresses, right? There were no standards at the time. And then everything changed in the 90s when the Westin launched the Heavenly Bed. Westin declared that good sleep was no longer a luxury, it was a standard. And now you don't go into any branded hotel that doesn't have white sheets, comfortable pillows, right? They've really invested in that sleep experience. And that's followed suit into the bathrooms as well. And what we saw was that if you look back to 1987, about half the supply in the US was about independents versus branded hotels. But if you look fast forward, independent hotels, which is in that light aqua color, the supply of independent hotels has not grown at all. All of the supply in the US, all the growth we've seen is from branded hotels because people want to know what they're paying for, and they want to be able to anticipate. And so standards have meaning to people and brands have meaning to people. And that's why now, if you look at the US hotel supply and new hotels, nearly 75% of all new hotels being built today in the US are under a branded line, right? And only just about a quarter are independents. And so if we think back to that slide where you saw the Toyota Camry and the investment in the US highway system, the vacation rental industry is very much in the same position that we were in the 70s and 80s with the hotels. From a technology perspective, it is so easy today to find and list your property on places like the OTAs, Airbnb, or Vrbo. There's been policy changes where now it's more than ever acceptable to work from home, right? So you have this remote work from home. And so there's obviously, as we've seen in the vacation rental industry, there's tremendous demand now for vacation rentals. But we experienced the same quality challenges with vacation rentals that the hotels faced back in the 70s and 80s. And so we really feel that there's a huge opportunity to invest in this quality framework and develop this quality framework for vacation rentals. And so we can talk about how we would do that. We really feel there's an opportunity here to set standards when it comes to the comfort of the stay, the sleeping, bathing, and eating, things that you can repeat across your portfolio of properties, right? Every property can have the same sheets if you invest in a linen program, the same coffee maker. That's not where the guests are looking for uniqueness. They're looking for uniqueness in the decor or the location. So you don't have to create the cookie cutter experiences that hotels have created. You can just focus on those comfort areas, but really invest in the service levels.
100%. So we'll start with that, which is
Yeah.
that sort of difference between hotels and vacation rentals. And I'm gonna move a few slides back because I never follow the flow that we write out. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sasha. I know you're probably reviewing what I'm doing here and being like, I wrote these decks for you to flow, and I'm taking it in a different path here. But one of the things that we notice with short-term rentals versus hotels, and I'll start off with the fact that 82% of short-term rental guests compared the short-term rental options with hotel options. So it's not like you have a completely different type of guest that's necessarily booking. It's different flows, different types of bookings based on different experiences. And I think, Ashley, you pointed that, which is sometimes you might fly Spirit if it's the bachelorette party, and sometimes you might fly Delta if it's the family.
Right.
If you can afford private jet, then that's a whole different category, because I would just do the PJ all the time instead.
Yeah.
But that's not for everyone. In terms of the service category, what's interesting about the short-term rental uniqueness is that people like short-term rentals because it's unique, because of the space advantage where you have multiple rooms, you can bring more people. You sometimes feel like you can have maybe more of that personalized experience, or maybe less. So in this case, it's actually 46% favor short-term rentals for personalized experience, and only 45% for superior designs. So hotels seem to be beating us here a bit as well. What's interesting on the gap as well is the expectation. So superior customer service, people favor hotels, and that's probably because of concierge and so on. The attentiveness, the professionalism, resolving issues, but listing accuracy, people actually favor short-term rentals. I could see that just from the fact that we have so many more pictures as short-term rentals of every single bedroom and every single cupboard, and even some include floor plans of the properties so that you know exactly what you're jumping into, versus a room where it's, okay, here's the bed, here's the view, here's the bathroom. That's all you need to know. And it's one of 50, and maybe you'll get a slightly different view, slightly different bathroom setup, but it'll pretty much be that layout. So there's different expectations based on hotels and short-term rentals. One of the unique things I think about short-term rentals is the fact that it's unique accommodations. They're all different. So I'll start with you, Rachel, which again, I'm not following the flow, so I apologize. This is conversation format, but how do you think standardization appears in vacation rentals when the inventory isn't standardized to begin with?
When I started in this business, and I joined this lodging association in Park City, and it's a lodging association that's been around for 30 years. So that was a long time ago. A lot of people in there had already been in the business for a while. And I kept saying, we need standards, we need tiers. We all agreed, but we also all agreed, oh, it's too hard, we can't figure it out. Because the properties are so unique, how can you standardize when they have different types of decor and they were built at different times and they're remodeled at different times, and how could you possibly? And so I remember this feeling of wanting to achieve standards, but thinking that it felt impossible. And part of that was that I felt like I was afraid that I could get a homeowner to spend money and do the things I thought that they would need to do in order for us to have tiers and standards that would really make sense. And then I thought that all of it would cost too much money in general, right? Whether the homeowner is going to pay for it or not, how would we ever be able to get enough money spent so that everything could be standardized? And there was a lot of fear at the time about how this would just be too big and impossible, and how I would have to risk having homeowners in my portfolio in order to achieve that. I just didn't have the confidence that it is possible, or that I would be able to keep my business going and growing if I were to try to adhere to some standards. And so I can tell you now, looking back all these years later, that the thing that stopped me was the fear of thinking, number one, that I wasn't sure if I knew what I was talking about yet. I wasn't sure that I knew what a standard was and how it could be achieved throughout the properties. So I didn't really feel confident in telling that to the homeowners. And then I wasn't sure that they would still stick with me, or that homeowners would want to work with us instead of another company if we were trying to have our homeowners adhere to a standard. And what I've learned is that's unfounded. So now in our business, and really it's because we do work with Inhaven, and they've helped us with a lot of resources to get our homeowners to adhere to these standards that we have. It has not been a problem. We're not losing homeowners. We're gaining homeowners. I am an expert. I can say that now. It's been all these years. I know what the guests want. I know what works for a homeowner. I know what is a good value, not too much of a spend. And I have finally all the data. For many years, I didn't have people on my team that could pull the correct data for me. I couldn't do it. We weren't able to really run the numbers the way we needed to in order to show that adhering to these linen programs, the way the bathroom and the kitchens and how we wanted all of that, how that would all make sense financially, and the profitability on all those items individually per property, and how all that worked. Now I have that and I have that capability. So now I can present that to homeowners. So to me, the shift here is that we were just a newer industry. We didn't have the confidence. We didn't have the data. And so we were all just making up the concept of standards and why it would be a good idea. And it was, but we didn't know exactly why, and we didn't have anything to back it up. And then now with companies like Inhaven and people like Ashley, and then once someone has shown me, Ashley explaining all of this hotel background on how their standards and brands came into place and how that can relate to vacation rentals, it's really shifted it for me. Over time, as a company, we built standards and SOPs, but it did take the confidence and also the tools and the data in order for me to be able to see with confidence, this is actually something that makes financial sense. And I can have success in explaining it to homeowners to get everyone on the same page without losing business. And in fact, being able to improve the reputation that my brand has across the 3 markets and any other markets that we go into, because it's, look, I can show that we could apply these standards to all the properties that we manage, that it is not a huge cost, that it does have positive financial benefits to the homeowner, and that it has positive benefits to the home in general, and just the way that maintaining that investment.
I started Inhaven because I was a frustrated guest, and I knew how to source hospitality grade goods. That's my background. But what's been the most surprising is that the property managers actually want this almost more than the guests. Now they can communicate and they can be very transparent with their owners and with their teams. Their teams know if a coffee maker breaks, what do I do? If a dinnerware cracks, what happens? And so they've got these standards in place for these items where it doesn't impact the decor of the home. It's really just what's stocked in those specific areas.
Yeah. It's funny because when it comes to different items within standardization, I see it in different flows, right? So we talk about linens, we talk about cutlery or coffee makers. But one example I had was also even with smart locks, where 5 years ago, the access point of smart locks, I was trying to sell to a customer our solution, which is connected to smart locks. And this was a French customer. Now, this is a very important data point because being French, I can tell you, the adoption of new technology in France is sometimes a bit slower, I would say, than in North America. I come to him in COVID times, or just before COVID times, with this idea around smart locks and so on. And first thing he tells me is, "No, why would we do this? We have different types of doors. It's just too complicated, not worth it." But once the operator was able to see the benefit of, wait a minute, I don't need to show up every single time. I don't need to have guests drive across the city to go pick up keys to unlock this old rustic French door that I could have probably slapped a smart lock on. Now, those operators, it's almost obvious that every guest should need a smart lock. And it came from both the guest side, who just wanted to check in and don't want to have to tell you, I'm going to show up at 5, so can you make sure to be there at 4:45 in case I'm there earlier, and don't wait under the rain. And so that standardization within access is pretty much there with vacation rentals. Still, a lot of operators don't have that, and it's fine. But many operators have agreed that, you know what, access control needs to be automated. And we're seeing this in different facets. So you guys are bringing a completely different perspective, because I'm coming in from the tech side, which is AI, smart locks, upsells, and all that jazz. But you're coming in as well from the actual physical items within that property.
It is just another example of it, right?
100%. 100%.
We're all afraid, and we could never, that won't work in vacation rentals. And then you just, over time, all these little steps are taken until all of a sudden, I feel like now in the last couple of years, it's really become clear to me that standards and a brand that matters to the guest and the homeowner, this is important. We've always been like, it's not going to happen in vacation rentals. It's too fragmented. The properties are all, no, that's BS.
Yeah, 100%.
We weren't ready to accept that. And now we weren't ready to accept that standards could be adhered to. And it's, you can do this. And we all used to think, but the properties are so different in ski towns. If it's a log cabin and then a modern one and a 3-bedroom versus a 7-bedroom, there's no way you could have standards. But actually, it's not true, right? Yes, you can have standards with the amenities in the bathroom and the way the towels and the linens are and the way the kitchen is set up. And there's all these important parts so that when anyone goes to any of those houses, and the houses themselves might be in different locations, one might be ski in, ski out, one might be close to town, one might be really large, and one might be 3 bedrooms. But it's if these kitchen and bathroom standards are adhered to, linens, towels, there's all these touch points that are standardized, a guest is able to feel that consistency across these different style of properties. So we're talking about this within the context of the guest, but what about the context of operations? And Ashley, maybe you can touch on that, which is there an impact on operations, Rachel as well,
with standardizing these kinds of items, be it efficiencies from cleaners or even just operations in the background of when that coffee maker is broken, you know exactly what needs to do because it's standardized. Can you talk a bit more about the operational gains from that as well?
We work with some larger property managers. And I think once you hit 20 properties, you can no longer continue to scale, quote unquote, without having standards in place. You cannot have your team driving an hour away, because we work with a lot of companies in these remote towns where they're driving an hour to go to Costco to hope that the sheet that they bought from the last time was still there. There was just so much wasted time with going out, you're having your team source, or you have the dinnerware design that you need to find that's no longer stocked. And so now you're buying other types of plates and you've got mixed inventory and it looks really unprofessional. And so really we see the most benefits besides the guests on the operations in creating these standards, creating these SOPs so that the team knows when these things need to be replaced, because all of the things that we're focused on at Inhaven in terms of comfort of the stay, the sleep experience, bathing and eating, will break. There's a lifetime on linens. It lasts about 100 washes. Will need to be replaced. And so as you replace those items, this is what you're going to replace it with. And then to Rachel's point earlier, the owners, I think there's just more transparency with your owners of we're taking care of one of your most valuable assets. If something happens, this is what we replace it with. And I always joke on Rachel's team, or I don't joke, but Julie on her team will bring a box of all the items. What does the stemware look like? What does the dinnerware look like? So the owners feel comfortable with, okay, this is going to go in my home. This looks great. And we trust Abode.
It's been monumental the way that we've been able to do that, because Francois, I'm sure you're aware of this. Before a company like Inhaven, I would buy dishes at Bed Bath & Beyond a lot from when I started. I would go to Bed Bath & Beyond. I know that sounds crazy, even with 100 properties. And I'd be buying stuff, but it comes in 4 packs or whatever, like a set. You can't buy one-offs. And so we were always trying to keep the consistency in the houses, but we really couldn't because it was whatever was available. And even if we were ordering online, stuff wasn't available. And so this concept of being able to have that's more similar to the restaurant, how they can order consistently over a long period of time, the same place settings, like silverware and the plates and all that stuff, and that they can replace one at a time or a couple at a time. I have to buy a 4 set. We didn't have this option, especially not in a price point and a level of quality that was matching. We didn't need commercial grade. So what Ashley allows us to do now with Inhaven is they have a chip guarantee. So if a plate or a glass gets a chip, we can just order another one and it's replaced for free. I don't even have to tell the homeowner. I just say, my team is, this and this is broken. We replace it. That's it. Yeah. That's insane. We never had that. All these years we were trying to keep stock and switching. Same with linens. Before a company like Inhaven, we all were buying our linens. And I'm sure there are people on here right now. You buy your linens from your local linen supplier. So we were buying hotel quality good linens and towels. We're buying them from the local supplier. That local supplier is still a smaller supplier, right? So wherever they're getting their linens is switching, and they're going to have to get a different shadow stripe king duvet cover or whatever, then I don't have access to my old one. And now my inventory is going to switch. And that was a problem. And working with Inhaven, they're keeping it consistent over a long period of time. So homeowners are not seeing random mixed linens and towels. Guests are not seeing that. And I actually, with our price point, we were getting comments from time to time about everything's not totally the same. And so from the homeowner's point of view, it's, I've got you covered. I'm going to replace any chip stuff. I'm going to take care of that. No problem. I don't have to worry about it. You're not going to have to redo all your place settings every few years because we can't get the other one again. You're not going to have to worry about the linens not looking the same. Sounds so simple, but it was not an option until very recently that we could actually have that consistency. This concept where Inhaven gives us a lot more tools so that we can go to the homeowner with all of this data on all these items that we're going to suggest for their home, the discount, the price point that they're getting. It's all really handy. And we could show up with samples and be like, here's what we're suggesting and why. It completely changed. This is why I stopped being scared of how this would be impossible in vacation rentals. And I've started to see within my own business, all of my homeowners love this. They're all happy. My guests, if you look at Abode reviews, you will see constantly in the last few years since we started working with Abode, constantly they're saying, this is the best outfitted kitchen I've ever had in a rental. These sheets were the best. They're saying it over and over. So I'm not even talking about it. We're not even discussing it with the guests. We're just doing it. And then they see it. And then the homeowner sees that review So standards are self-propagating at this point.
And we've all seen that randomness in vacation rentals where you have 3 knives and then 2 plastic knives and 1 baby knife. And you're like, what? And someone left their takeout knife in there as well. And it's just complete. And you're missing the butter knife or the actual important one. I don't know why my example is the butter knife. Wow, how French of me. But you get the point. Now, we talked about standardization from a few different items. I want to talk about brands as well within vacation rentals and how standardization leads to certain brands potentially being recognized, because there's the constant debate of OTAs are taking our bookings. It's hard to have a direct booking brand. Build your own website and you'll suddenly have a brand that everyone recognizes. The reality isn't really there yet. OTAs are still driving the majority of travel bookings for guests. Some brands are recognized, but not all, and mostly recognized for maybe their grandeur, i.e. you had Vacasa that was recognized for just being the biggest. You had Sonder that was recognized for raising a lot of money, but they're not recognized for the experience or for how they run the business or the experience they provide. And I think it's hard when you have almost that boutique brand with 20 units or 200 units. So how does standardization drive brands being recognized in the near future? And both of you feel free to answer that.
Well, at the end of the day, from a guest-facing perspective, brands give meaning. What we haven't seen yet from a vacation rental perspective is a brand to emerge that truly gives the guest a meaning. If you have a portfolio of 50 properties, or whether I say Abode has built an amazing brand for Park City, where we're looking to work with Abode and others is to build a national brand concept for the US, that if someone has an incredible experience at Abode Luxury Rentals in Park City and they want to go to Hilton Head on a golf trip the next summer, they would of course stay with Best Nest Beverly Sorrel there and have a very similar experience, very similar linen program, quality outfitting of the kitchen and whatnot. And so really working with these property managers that have built these incredible brands locally to then give the guest options as they travel and they want a similar stay.
It's such a cool idea that if there was recognition from the guests and homeowners, we got to that point where they get it, that Inhaven has these standards and tiers, and that if a property management company or vacation rental company is working with them, then they would know what to expect within a certain tier, that concept. And what became Ashley's work at looking at the history of hotels and brands in hotels really was a huge epiphany for me a few years ago. And that's part of this whole obsession I have now, because she was bringing up the concept of the Westin Hotel and how in the late 90s is when the Westin and the Heavenly Bed concept got really heavily promoted and came into the game. When Ashley told this story, it really resonated for me, because it's like, we don't have that in the vacation rental industry, and we totally could.
Yeah.
We totally could. All we'd have to do is, as individual companies, we would have to commit, and somewhat collectively, if this concept of having this overarching standards, then there would have to be more mass commitment. I know I can commit to having really good standards of what Inhaven puts forward for the linens and the kitchen and the towels and all of that. And I can commit across all my 3 locations. And then I think to myself, the brands that exist in our industry right now, that they don't really matter to the guest or the homeowner, because they're not doing anything to create standards for the guest and the homeowner.
Yeah.
What they're doing is more about efficiencies on the backside with bookkeeping and HR and stuff like that. But what if there were standards on the front side, standards that were something that the guest and the homeowner could count on across multiple locations? And then there's a lot more that would go into this, but that would allow for brands that matter to our customers. That's a huge big deal. And it's something that used to seem impossible. And now I'm living it. It works really well. The homeowners are not pissed. They're happy. The guests are happy. Whoa, this is actually real, right? Yeah.
And it's working, yeah. And in terms of those brands, and you have different categories here. So for example, signature, premium, lifestyle, essential. And the answer will be an example with Marriott here. But when you have different type of inventory, if you're full luxury and all you have is luxury, or if you're only cabins in the woods and that's your vibe, great. You know how to maybe standardize things, both in terms of the physical elements, but also the types of properties and inventory that you're managing. But what about for operators who have that varying inventory as well? I know operators who have a couple 1-bedroom condos in the city, and then they have luxury mansions outside the city, and then they have the weird chalet in the forest, and they just manage different things. Now, is your recommendation standardize the type of inventory that you bring on in the first place, or is it start branding as well the different types of inventories? How do you create that framework across those different categories on different type of inventory as well? Trick question.
From a brand
Sorry.
perspective, and leads into a whole nother case study that we launched last August at Inhaven on just what makes for great hospitality. And that came out of the failures of Vacasa and Aimbridge, which was the largest property manager on the hotel side. We've since seen failures like Sonder and whatnot. We really talk about, you can probably max have about 2 different tiers that you're really managing at once to really give that great guest experience. Rachel, you should talk about let's just talk about service levels as an example. We find at Inhaven that the number one difference between an economy level hotel and a luxury hotel is the number of staff in the lobby. So when you check into a Motel 6, you might check into a kiosk with AI, or you'll have one person front of desk. But when you check into a Four Seasons, you will have literally up to 10, 15 people in the lobby sometimes. There's the bellhop, there's someone to open the door for you, there's the front desk person, there's the concierge, there might be even someone to push the elevator button for you, right? They're just investing in people and giving you service. And so that requires different types of business models and different teams. And it's really hard to stretch across multiple quality tiers and align your team because there's just different requirements. Rachel, do you want to talk a little bit about everything that you do at Abode to make it that luxury signature experience?
Yeah. And I think, Francois, for your question about if you had multiple different tiers within your business, I think you would just have to be setting your standards to whichever tiers that you said. So if you were like, Ashley and I were talking with Riley yesterday, who's got, oh my gosh, what's his company name? He's on the Space Coast.
VR.
And he was saying they have mostly lower mid tier, but they do have some that are upper mid. And so then you could just within your own portfolio assign these properties are within this tier, this is within this tier, and then and you could just say the linens, they could be different linens, or it could be that you have, maybe you set your standards high with all of your bed, bath, kitchen standards, maybe you meet in the middle, so you have one thing for everything. But then what Ashley was just talking about is the other piece of how you would look at tiers and vacation rentals for different levels of luxury or basically price points. I think a lot of it is tied to how expensive stuff is. It is that there's more people per guest or per room or per house or property when you're at a higher price point. We're more 5-to-1 or something like that with how many, because we have 200 homes we manage. We have over 50 people on the team. Not all those people are touching the guests, but there's a lot of humans per property or per rental, whatever. And so for us, that's part of what a standard we have to adhere to. And when Ashley said there's a lot of people, yesterday when we had this other discussion on this similar topic, we were talking about someone who's in the more lower mid tier might be really go heavy on the AI, and they'll be able to have a lot of automated interactions with the guests, which I think could work fine. Now, for my guests, that could never work, right? No matter how good AI gets, the guests that I deal with, they want a lot of touch. And so you would have to have a standard where you have enough people on the team to allow for that while using AI for efficiencies too. But there still has to be people.
Yeah.
But if you look at different tiers, you might not need all those people at a different tier. Part of the eye-opening piece of this is if you have standards and if we can put them into place, whether within our own businesses or maybe one day across the industry, that doesn't mean that everyone has to meet the same standard. That's the reason for tiers. This allows the different price points or the different levels of service to exist, and then also to be a situation where the guest and the homeowner as customers are happier within those tiers because they know what they're getting. If you go to a Holiday Inn because you're going to my kid's baseball tournament and we're staying in a Holiday Inn for that, we know what we're getting. We're not annoyed that we're at a Holiday because we knew that it's a Holiday Inn and we knew what we're getting.
Yeah.
And then it's like maybe the next trip you're staying at Four Seasons or something, and then you know what you're getting there. And that is what can help keep the customer happier. And I think within hotels, that's where you've seen a lot of success and happy customers is as those tiers and standards were established, and then people had all of this trust. Now, potentially you could say that in hotels, the brands have gotten really big and diluted, and the parent companies have added too much underneath, and it's getting, so you could maybe say that's not working as well anymore. But I don't think that's a dig on that system. I think it may have just been expanded too much or whatever, and they've taken it too far. In terms of vacation rentals and thinking where we could start, it's just super inspirational for me because all of a sudden I realize these standards can be adhered to. It's not something I need to be afraid of. What could that mean with our own company for expansion and our ability to be consistent across many markets, and also for the industry and just for our guests and our customers to have more comfort in general with what we do.
100%. 100%. And there's different business models to drive towards that as well, to get your brand recognized. But as you add more listings and get that name out there and have that standardization across the experience, people will start to recognize effectively your brand, be it in the market that you operate in or globally or multi-state if you're in different states. But I certainly see that. I think a good example of brands within hotels that maybe are a bit more boutique and are building towards that is like the Ace Hotel, which is so unique in its architecture of all of the buildings, but it also brings that cool hip vibe of not too much effort luxury kind of thing. Yeah. Although I don't know if I call it luxury, but no, I totally get this. Now, a good segue, and we're going to move to the do's and don'ts, but a good segue, and you brought up the topic of AI, and part of what I see as well is standardization happening within technology for operators as well. And by that, processes, standard operating procedures, the amount of property managers that I see that have very poor data hygiene, that have no real processes being written out anywhere. It's just in the boss's head. They know that if this happens, just do this. And when you hire that new employee and they get it wrong, you tell them, and then you hope that they remember the next time. That is now starting to be written out. People are starting to write out systems and documents on how to handle situations, to the point that it's not just about the tone of voice. It's not just about how to handle situations. It's also about the tone and the voice that we use and the language on how we communicate with guests. And AI is accelerating that to a certain extent, because AI only works as good as the data that you provide it. So if you don't give it those standards and you don't give it that tone of voice, it's not going to represent very well. And this is something that we've seen. We've analyzed all of these different listings on our autopilot functionalities that effectively just not only respond to guests, but take that agent layer of being your team member in handling situations. And what we're seeing is the systems are all the same. It's all kind of the same process. It's be polite to your guests. Don't insult them. Give them the information. Don't write a bunch of bullet points. Follow up if there's an emergency. It's all the same kind of systems that we actually see in hotels that are already standardized. And I think that the key difference here is that vacation rentals, you don't need to go to hotel school or vacation rental school to start a business. Anybody can go and get units and start it. So everyone's done their own sauce. I think there's also the whole Airbnb trend of, I'm renting out my couch and it's cool and it's vibes. And now it's actually professional companies that are just leveraging Airbnb as a channel. Almost half of vacation rentals that we see on the OTAs are professionally managed. They're not hobby hosts. All of that, I think we're seeing it as well on the technology side of how to standardize the experience, the communication, and the flow. The concept of a guest portal was unknown to guests and operators 5 years ago. Now everyone's using one form or another, be it a guidebook, be it a full portal, and we're shifting away from that long paragraph of here's all of your instructions, read through this 60-page notebook that I wrote for you in a small message screen and find everything you need and don't bother me again. So standardization is happening in different levels in different areas. And I do push every operator to start thinking about what are those standards for your brand or brands, plural if you have many. So without that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the do's and don'ts of standardization in vacation rentals. So we can go around whatever the clockwise is. I'll start with you, Ashley. Do you want to share the playbook of do's and don'ts for standardization in hospitality and vacation rentals?
Yeah, I don't think that guests that are staying in vacation rentals are looking for the same kind of cookie cutter experience that the hotels offer. I could wake up in a Hyatt in Cincinnati, Ohio, or Tokyo, Japan, and not know where I am in some cases. But they're not looking for uniqueness when it comes to the sleep, bathing, eating, and cleanliness standards. So I think those are the areas I would start. I would start looking at your standards around what is your bed, how do you make up your beds, what's in your bathrooms, what's in your kitchens, and how are you cleaning your places? And then look at your service levels, where you truly fit in terms of the level of service, and start to really make sure that you're developing SOPs and processes around delivering on those standards.
100%. How about yourself, Rachel?
Yeah, totally. You were telling my life story when you were going through all that, Francois. But with creating SOPs and standards, I think a lot of us, especially after COVID, we were balls to the wall. We were, fire hose of money to the face, and we were just trying to keep up. And so it was maybe really hard at that moment to be like, and now I need to do standards too, at least for me. And obviously I'm in ski markets out west where we did not have a lot of snow this year. So that but it gives me a little more space. And also in the last couple of years, things slowed a bit after the big craziness after COVID. And so it's allowed us to have a little more time. So this has been the first time, and this is crazy for me to admit this, but in all these years, this is the first time that we focused on serious SOPs. And really, believing in standards. I have just been the person that didn't believe in this, and I was wrong. I'm wrong a lot. And so what I've learned is a few things. One, we have done a lot of work to define what is it to train hospitality. I literally just finished writing a book that will come out in October about the concept of how are you training hospitality, right? Because it's a really hard thing. It's kind of like luxury. What does that mean? Nothing. So I do think it's an important thing to define and then to have standards and training for that, because it is a vibe and it is a thing that you can put in AI and get the voice, but it's more than that, right? Because to me, hospitality is connection. How are you training people to connect? But then it's also creating the SOPs, which this is where I think AI, and even for luxury, this is where AI is glorious. Even though I got to have 1 million people to touch these guests constantly, I was never going to have standards and SOPs to the level that I needed them without AI, because I didn't have time and no one on my team had time. We're a small business. We're not overstaffed. I wish. And so with AI, having some tools that even within my team where we're not tech people have started to put in the SOPs that they had already created and start to create more SOPs based on what was inputted, and they're starting to look very consistent, then that's a great place to start, is to just pick something. And there's probably tools out there that are, and that's the trick, is to not be the person who doesn't start. Just don't wait anymore. Just get in there and start making some SOPs. For us, we started with operations, housekeeping. Some of that stuff is a little bit easier because it's task-based. It's this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then this happens, then this. And so we can create these SOPs for the team. And then now I've been a lot more focused on now expanding that out into the rest of the company. We had an issue in Sun Valley where the way linens were handled from this one house and how that all went down. And then the result wasn't really good. Let's fix this problem, but here, let's do something new as a company. Let's now look at our process and our SOPs around that, and let's fine tune that so this doesn't happen again. Because if you don't have this, you cannot go to the root, and you're just beating your head against the wall and throwing spaghetti all the time. And just, I hope this works. Once you can start you start with something as your SOP, then you can continue to fine tune that, right? You continue to make it better over time. But if you don't have that written out first, you're not going to be able to like efficiently make your processes better, just verbally and looking through your email and how you did it before, which is, I think, what a lot of people, including me.
100%.
So I think using AI to create what we call at our company, we call it our playbook. It's the group of SOPs that are the whole thing where it lives for everyone in all the different departments. We have now created shared services departments in the company so that whether it's marketing or operations or revenue management, these are the departments where there's someone overseeing that. And then there's SOPs created that then fan out to all the locations. That sounds crazy when you're a small business owner. That's so corporate. I don't want anything like that. But I'm here to say, as much as I fought against everything, including org charts and job titles, now we have all those things, and we have these shared services with SOPs in each department, and holy moly.
Yeah, it's standardization on operations. Just, we talked about standardization on linen, standardization on access, standardization on communication, and finding how your business runs over time. I'd say the same thing for Playbook, which kind of echoes what both of you have said here. And I would add as well your data hygiene. And this is, I give an example of this when you're thinking about adding new software or when you're thinking about connecting things together. We're moving towards a more connected world. AI is making software more connected in of itself. And what I see is, I'll give you guys an example. Customer goes into their property management software, creates a field called Wi-Fi. And then they add a new listing and they create a new field called Wi-Fi name.
Yep.
And then they add another one and it's called Wi-Fi network. And it's, oh my God. So now you have 3 different fields that all mean the same thing. So, you know, your AI, your operations tool, your guest experience platform, even your teams, they won't know where to find. My favorite one, I think, is when it's access code and it's like access code, front door code. And it's, which one is it now? What am I giving to the guest?
Yeah. And how can you connect everything when they're like all named slightly different?
100%. Apply that same kind of thinking in terms of data hygiene at every level of your business. So when it comes to owner acquisition, when you onboard an owner, what is the information I'm gathering from that owner? And am I just getting on a call and vibing with them and being like, oh yeah, it was a 3-bedroom, not a 2-bedroom? Or am I actually having a setup process to bring them online? When I communicate with my guests, same thing. So standard operating procedures.
Onboarding SOPs, this is so important. We're still like fine-tuning ours significantly.
Yeah.
Like, it's, someone just asked in the chat, like, how detailed, and I think it should be very detailed. But again, I think first you just have to start. don't let being detailed stop you from getting going. Like you can go on any tool you want to use, AI or whatever, and like just start creating some SOPs. And then once you're using them with your team,
Iterate.
all comes out in the wash, right? Because then your team is going to be like, this isn't detailed enough. This is too detailed. That you're going to fine tune it, but you have to start from something, whether you're talking about hospitality and the behaviors and the voice, or you're talking about how you stock the stock room, how you remove stock from the stock room, how you wash the linens. All of it is so much improved with starting with some sort of SOP.
I couldn't agree more. I'm just going to move to questions, which if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop them in the right-hand side. You just answered one, Rachel, which is how detailed do you make your SOPs? Get started, even with something as basic as a couple points on how to handle a situation, and then you can expand from there. AI builds it for you. It's not even that hard, but I think also make it iterative. Make it part of your team's DNA that things will break and it's fine. And we'll refine that process to ensure that it works for everyone. And I think the same applies, I'm sure, with Inhaven as well, be it for you internally, but also with the customers that you work with, which is that maybe this isn't the right fit. We'll adapt and we'll add other layers that make more sense for homeowners and guests. So think of it as an iterative process, not a one-time, once I have that, I'm stuck with this process. This was a really fun conversation. We called this part 1, everyone, because we figured this would be a long conversation. There's so many things to talk about. So we might have a part 2 coming out soon.